It took a while, but it's finally time we took a look at Kanna KIZUCHI. She's that token scared and cowardly character of the group who eventually becomes a strong-willed individual by the end of the game. Just like Reiko and Alice, she and So have different routes. I'm not going to go too much into detail because I do want to save them for a future video. With that said, let's get some introductions out of the way. Kanna is a very shy and nervous kid when we're first introduced to her, and was sad for pretty much the entirety of Chapter 1. She blamed herself for not being able to save her sister during the first trial. She had immense PTSD and emotional trauma, and it wasn't until she spoke with Professor Mishima that she was able to mend some of that trauma. Kanna had asked Sarah if she could have saved her sister, seeing as Kanna, Sarah, and Mishima all had the same trial. She blamed herself for not listening to her sister, and ultimately began hating herself for not being able to save her. The loving sister she knew was taken over by Kanna's own insecurities and shortcomings, creating a version that hated Kanna and blamed her for her death. Mishima swoops in to divert the conversation. He tells Kanna that she shouldn't be fixated on the past and her failures. Instead, he tells her to focus on her real sister, the one who was always kind and always thought about Kanna. With some encouragement from Sarah, she was able to regain some of her confidence. Sarah would continue to act as Kanna's older sister, but this relationship wasn't all sunshine and rainbows from the beginning. It was pretty rocky for quite a while because there was a constant shift between trust and distrust. After Mishima died, Miley began harassing Kanna and took away the strength she'd just gotten back. Sarah tries to talk to Kanna about it, but she says, "I'm sorry. Please don't be nice to me anymore. I'm afraid of having hope." There's a couple things going through her mind. First, the realization that Sarah and Mishima had lied to her, two people whom she thought she could trust. Sarah in particular because Kanna sees her as an older sister. That's why Kanna wanted to ask her if there was any way she could have saved her sister. She wanted to hear the answer from Sarah over anyone else. Second, she's pretty much conditioned to have a fear of hope. She doesn't want people to be nice to her, nor does she want to put faith in someone else because she's afraid that she'll just get hurt. Her anxiety came back and she became very vulnerable, something a certain Beanie Man took advantage of. Despite this, she still asked So not to do anything that would hurt Sarah. You would think Kanna would have trouble trusting Sarah, but it seems that she still has the desire to protect her. She had already lost her real sister, so she wants to do what she can to not let the same thing happen to Sarah. But it didn't seem like Sarah felt the same. So had used Kanna, and Sarah knows this. She knows Kanna wasn't at fault here, but the fact of the matter is, Joe had died. Sarah wasn't ready to make up with Kanna, nor could Kanna look Sarah in the eyes after what she'd done. Sarah either didn't care what happened to Kanna, or wanted to keep her at arm's reach because she didn't trust her. Even deciding to reconcile for real or just superficially is hard. The superficial option just sounds so fake, and I get that's kind of the point, but reading it just sounds so disingenuous and I don't care for it at all. But I digress. When discussing with Kanna on day 1, we learn about her upbringing, but more importantly, her character. She doesn't want to be a burden to others. She admires Sarah's strong will and ability to move forward, but more importantly, she doesn't want to paint people in a negative light. All seems well and good until she takes the laptop from Kyutaro. So had promised to give her sister's phone back if she brought the laptop to him. And although she did regain some peace of mind, Kanna had betrayed Sarah a second time. After the final attraction, So wanted to reconcile with everyone. Sarah was once again given the option to reconcile with Kanna. If she chooses not to shake hands with her, Kanna would grab her hand instead and ask her for forgiveness. And I feel like this should have been what the first reconciliation was. Actions speak louder than words, and in my opinion, there was definitely a lot more emotion in this scene. So and Kanna are a dynamic duo, for all the wrong reasons. So had been using Kanna from the very beginning. He took advantage of her vulnerability by putting her in his debt when she picked up the sacrifice. He then tells Kanna to act as a sage so that he could expose Kai. So's manipulation carried over to the next chapter. He told Kanna to take the laptop from Kyutaro in exchange for her phone. Having betrayed Sarah a second time, he tells her that she has nowhere left to go, and Kanna was in So's debt once again. So tried to shift all the votes onto Kanna during the second main game, as he was under the assumption that Kanna had the sacrifice. Despite everything, however, all the manipulation and all the backstabbing, surprisingly enough, he's being very protective of Kanna as well. The first time we see this happening is during the first main game. He wanted to steer the conversation away from her when questioned about her usefulness. The second time was when he changed the message on her sister's phone. Before, it was this very hateful message, but So changed it to something that would give Kanna hope. The third time was during the second main game. If chosen, the sacrifice is allowed to live, as well as bring one other person with them. You can definitely see this as a selfish ploy to get himself out of the game, but it was more so a way to help Kanna escape. Now that all the context is out of the way, I want to go back to Sarah's discussion with Kanna. She told Sarah that she didn't get along with her sister at first, but she didn't want to make her sister out to be the villain either. We see this trait take effect during her interactions with So. At first, she wasn't entirely sure of what So was doing. She didn't really understand the mind games that were taking place, nor was she really following what was going on. She was distraught, and still struggling to find out who she can trust and whether or not she wanted to still be alive. However, there were two things she was sure about. If she did everything So had told her to do, he'd tell her everything. At the same time, what he was doing made Sarah sad. She obviously didn't want that because there was still a piece of her that wanted to believe in Sarah. At the same time, she didn't want to believe that So was a bad person either. She tells everyone that she'd look for So when he disappeared because he'd be less wary of her. But she also wants to understand what So is thinking. You've lost your memories now, So, but in the main game, you were really terrifying. But Kanna thinks, if you weren't there, maybe we all would have died. Kanna really wants to believe that So isn't as bad as everyone makes him out to be. He's an asset to the group, but the problem is, he isn't willing to open up to anyone. He continued to separate himself from others. She thought that because So had found a way out, things would change, but it turns out that she has to take matters into her own hands. Kanna reveals that she initiated the fifth trade, to take the sacrifice away from Sarah. Seeing the message left on her phone calmed her down. She wasn't going to be someone who hated herself anymore. She wanted to return the kindness Sarah had given to her because she knew that Sarah wouldn't be able to trade the sacrifice to someone else. It was a burden Kanna was willing to shoulder. Not only that, she didn't want to make So a murderer. Kanna knew that he traded the sacrifice to Sarah. It's naive to think that So was still trustworthy up to this point, but she knew So's kindness was real. He protected her when she couldn't do anything, even tossing away his own desire to live if it meant saving Kanna. Voting was certainly hell this time around. Kanna told everyone to vote for her instead of So. She'd intended to die when she resolved to take the sacrifice away from Sarah. In exchange, she wanted everyone to trust So. So frantically tries to sway the votes in his direction, but Kanna reminds everyone of the first main game. Please, remember the first main game. We all chose Kai as the victim. For our survival, we didn't choose by feelings, but logic. But wasn't that a mistake? Real failure is wavering. Not trusting your beliefs is weakness. And this time, the right thing to choose is logic, so that you can escape. You should choose Kanna. Everyone was thrown off guard. Keiji wanted to respect Kanna's wishes and voted for her, but Kyutaro questions Keiji on why he'd sacrifice a kid for the sake of adults. Reiko agrees and votes for So. So does Alice. In the end, the choice was ultimately up to Sarah. If Kanna dies, So would fall into despair, and Sarah would wake up from a nightmare, causing her to forget Joe. As with the Alice route, the atmosphere becomes a lot darker. So tries to shrug off her death like it was nothing, but Keiji tells him straight. He tells him that there was no way Kanna would have picked him over Sarah, but tells him that he has to cooperate because Kanna had made her decision. Throughout the course of So's route in Chapter 3, there are some not-so-subtle red flags which I'll talk about in another video. All you need to know is that it gets really, and I mean really, bad in So's route. In Kanna's route, however, it's a lot more hopeful. The entire chapter really shows how much Kanna has grown. It turns out Kanna knew that the changed message wasn't written by her sister. It was by So. As much as a liar So was, his affection was real. He always protected Kanna when she couldn't do anything, and this was before when she found out that she and So were siblings. She wanted to be strong. There were people who cared for her, people she didn't want to see die, Kurumada for instance. He intended to sacrifice himself, similar to So, but Kanna didn't want that. Whenever she feels like giving in, she has visions of So and her sister. She doesn't want to let them down. She wants them to die in peace, knowing that she's going to be fine on her own. Regret and reflection are two different things. While it's easy to regret your decisions and give in to them, it's harder to look back, accept what happened, and move on. It wasn't easy for Kanna. There were many hurdles she had to go through to get to where she is now, many traumatic experiences that she couldn't turn away from, but she didn't buckle under the pressure. She still had people who looked out for her and helped her change. No matter what challenges come her way, she'll be ready.